The Sixers entered the season with 14 players on roster and with KJ Martin on a very tradable contract for a reason. And a popular name has come to the conversation with Jonathan Kuminga being connected to the Sixers in a number of different reports. I want to break down the likelihood of a trade for him coming to Philadelphia and whether or not I think it would be a good idea and if that is the needle moving missing piece for the Sixers team. So let's start off by diving into the reports that we have from Jake Fisher here saying, quote, the 76ers are a team with interest in Kuminga. Sixers have definitely indicated around the league that they are willing to pay to add another piece. They are willing to spend their draft capital. And to elaborate on that a little more, I do have this report here saying that the 76ers and Nets potentially could have interest in Warriors forward Jonathan Kuminga should Kuminga come available in trade talks, per NBA insider Jake Fisher, saying, quote, the Sixers have definitely indicated around the league that, and behind the scenes, they are willing to pay to add another piece. They are willing to spend their draft capital. And the article continues to say Philadelphia may be willing to go into the luxury tax to increase its championship odds. Right now, though, there isn't a reason to believe the Warriors want to part ways with Kuminga's, other than perhaps the sides failed to agree on a contract extension. But not only did they fail to agree on a contract extension, as we did get the update, I'm recording this ahead of the Warriors game tonight, that Jonathan Kuminga has been benched and is no longer coming out of the starting lineup. And why I do think this is notable is this is also a game in which Steph Curry is not there. He obviously suffered that ankle injury. He's expected to miss a little bit of time. I thought this was going to be the true trial period for whether or not Jonathan Kuminga could be potentially that next piece. What things are screaming to me a little bit more is there may be a rebuild in Golden State a little bit sooner than we are all realizing. That Steph Curry, while he still plays like he's ageless, is getting up there in years, and it would not shock me if this is a sell the farms type of situation where they hit the full reset button, possibly as soon as this season or at the end of this year. And frankly, I don't have high hopes about that team keeping its head above water while Curry is hurt. Let's not forget that this team didn't even make the playoffs last year as they were beat by the Kings in the play-in there. Now, as far as Kuminga as a whole, I do want to dive in a little bit deeper into the takes here before I give my thoughts. And this coming from Liberty Baller. Shout out to Dave Early, a really good writer who breaks down the Fisher breakdown as well as a little bit more on Kuminga. And he writes, quote, this being from Fisher, quote, two suitors. The league is always planning 18 months out. And so the first dominoes I want to put up on the board and have people aware of, the Philadelphia 76ers have this KJ Martin $7.9 million deal. People have called it the human trade exception. We need to find a better terminology for that. But KJ Martin is making far more money than he probably would have what his market value would be. The ability for Philadelphia to potentially trade him and that $7.9 million, Kuminga's $7.6 million that Jonathan Kuminga sits at right now is in there. And the article continues to say, in case you're not well versed in the Sixers players' salaries, Fisher is alluding to the fact that the Sixers last summer gave what sometimes referred to as a balloon deal to Martin, the forward who came over in the James Harden blockbuster trade in 2023. Martin, an athletic specimen, was a problem for the Milwaukee Bucks on the offensive glass in the season opener Tuesday before the game got out of hand. The IMG Academy product also happens to be the son of former Nets and Nuggets superstar Kenyon Martin, the high-flying power forward and former number one overall pick of the 2000 NBA draft. And Daryl, Morey, and Elton Brand, mindful of the new salary cap and apron landscape, knew that in order to trade some of their now potent draft capital, they need more than minimum salary players to get the great return back. So that was the entire mindset between KJ Martin coming back next year. Now, I will add that I've been impressed with what I've seen from KJ Martin so far this year, and I do think he's a guy. He's only 23 years old, continuing to grow and improve. I'm not writing him off as far as what his outlook is at the NBA moving forward. I think there's a real chance that there's a forever role for KJ Martin in the league as long as he wants to play. I think he might carve out to be a nice role player. But the Sixers are very focused on winning a championship this year, and if you can find a player that increases those odds not named KJ Martin, you absolutely do it, because I still think, as much as that I'm praising KJ, I think if you really crunch this roster down to the playoff rotation, he likely does not crack that list anyway, and Kuminga is the guy who could potentially. Now, as far as a little bit more on Kuminga, do want to return to this article from Dave Early on Liberty Ballers here, who writes, Kuminga, a Congolese native, is listed at 6'8", 210 pounds. And if you've paid any attention to the worry sphere in Sixersville lately, it's that they lack size, athleticism, and rebounding, potentially at the 4 spot. Kuminga might be someone Morey has in mind, and it sounds like they wouldn't mind using picks to get him and then pay him what he deserves next summer, obliterating the tax if he cemented a title window in place. Most of you probably also know Kuminga is as the Warriors player who fell on Embiid's leg last February, leading to a meniscus surgery that the 2023 MVP continues to work his way back from. We know plenty about that. As Fisher makes clear, this is all a bit premature, but Kuminga is still just 22 years old. He was the number 7 overall pick in the 2021 NBA draft. Like Kelly Oubre Jr. and Caleb Martin, he can play the 3 and the 4 and in theory provides a lot of defensive versatility. He averaged a career-high 16.1 points per game in 2023-24 last season to go with 0.7 steals and 0.5 blocks in just 26 minutes per game. Per 36, that pops a bit more, translating to 22 points per game, 6.6 rebounds, 1 steal, and 0.7 blocks. The big question mark, you guessed it, is if the jump shot can translate. He's merely a 34% career shooter from beyond the arc with a career free throw percentage of just 70.6%. It's not a broken jumper, but would he space the floor? I suppose that would be Morey's big bet. And if that came along, at least in the way Andrew Wiggins' shot developed alongside Steph Curry, well, maybe they'd really have something. I do like the way that he paints this. I think is a pretty fair breakdown. I'll start off by saying I was very much a pro Jonathan Kuminga guy dating back to him entering the NBA draft during that season. Really liked what I saw from him with that G League Ignite team. He is a guy who took that alternate route, did not go to college, did not play professionally overseas, but the G League Ignite, which has now been shut down since then, but it was a season in the G League and then entering the draft. We've seen other guys do it, Scoot Henderson, Jalen Green, a number of other guys that have made that. Marjon Beauchamp, another one playing for the Bucks right now. But Kuminga was a guy that I believed in from what I saw from the film then. I was able to talk to the G League Ignite head coach at the time who spoke really highly about him. I still believe in him as a talent. I don't think Philadelphia is quite the place to maximize him. He strikes me as a guy that could use the growing pains, needs to play, I don't want to say losing basketball, but free basketball where there's not all this expectation constantly, and that's exactly the pressure cooker that he'd be thrown in if he was traded to the Sixers here. Looking at his numbers on the season so far, just 8 points per game, 3.3 rebounds, 1 assist, has only shot 33.3% from the field, just 11.1% from 3, has yet to make a corner 3. 1,000% of his threes are assisted, and 37.5% of his shots are from beyond the three-point arc. This is far too small of a sample size to have any significant concerns about it, but I will say from the Warriors basketball that I've watched this year, it hasn't been pretty from Jonathan Kuminga. And again, I thought that this period of time without Steph Curry would be like the true, okay, what do we have? Let's throw everything on his plate and see what happens. Maybe that still happens when more games play out and we see an opportunity, but the fact that he's already being sent to come off the bench is not the most, I guess, optimistic view to be painted on this. So for the Sixers, for starters, there's still a little bit of time until it's even legal to trade KJ Martin. I believe in November is what that date is, but don't hold me to that. I have to check, and I should know that offhand here before I record this video. But still a little bit of time until that becomes legal for him to trade KJ Martin. And for the Sixers team as a whole, let's not make that real deal, that final move, until you know it is the right guy. And what I think is important to emphasize here is I spoke plenty leading up to it about why I was so high on Paul George being the selection for the Sixers, that third star. A lot of it had to do with the on-court ability. Of course, I believe so strongly in having that trio of a real deal guard in Tyrese Maxey, a real deal wing in Paul George, and a real deal big man in Joel Embiid. But the other side of things for why it was such a great outlook to me is you did not have to use any of your assets up, that you did not have to trade away a bunch of draft picks to bring him in. Daryl Morey simply wrote his name on the check, and then Paul George deposited it in his account. You kept all the picks, and that gives you the flexibility to make this type of move here. So while I'm not ruling out Kuminga, I do think asking a 22-year-old who's still pretty raw to be that missing piece on a championship contender is a little bit ambitious here. This is not the Aaron Gordon trade that the Denver Nuggets did to put them over the edge. We know what Gordon was in Orlando, and obviously his role shifted, but he was far more developed at this point than what we're seeing from Kuminga. That Aaron Gordon-like player is what I think the Sixers are missing. I'm just not confident that Jonathan Kuminga is that just yet. So for the Warriors, or for the Sixers here, I would say let the Warriors continue to sort through and figure out what they have. I think how he is used in this next stretch without Steph Curry, it's going to say a lot about their belief in him and his outlook as a player, but I have no interest in the Sixers jumping the shark and getting ahead of things for fear of a bidding war or any other reason. So I do not need to see them pulling for the trigger for Jonathan Kuminga in the short term. My mind is still a little bit open in the long run, but I will say I have not been overly impressed by what I've seen from him since coming to the league. And to just touch on the stats, that he's played it all. This is his fourth season at this time. Did have his best year last year, but it's been limited opportunity throughout. Just 16.9 minutes per game as a rookie, 20.6 in his second year, 26.3 last season, and only 19.7 to start this year. I will note that Steve Kerr is running with a 12-man rotation currently, which is basically eating into everyone's minutes and production, and I don't think it's the best outlook as a team. I do think that will be tweaked, and they're kind of forced to now that Steph is hurt, but just kind of way too across-the-board data and far too many signs of concern for Kuminga for me to be ready to make that type of investment. There's a reason that the Warriors did not give him that long-term extension this summer, and I think we should take that a little bit into consideration here. But let me know if you guys disagree with me. Again, I do like Kuminga generally, and I still see a world where he becomes a very successful player. I just think they would be rushing his particular timeline to be looking at him to be this missing piece, that potential power forward, that athletic body that this team is missing. And I'll point directly at Gershon Yabusele once again. That is a guy far less risk with a guy who you can squint and kind of see the same abilities in his play here. So I'm not ready to go all in on Kuminga just yet. We'll see when we get closer to the deadline if that is something that is still in conversations or could make more sense at the time, especially when we'll have a better feel for what the Sixers roster is truly missing. Hopefully we'll get to see Tyrese Maxey share the floor with Joel Embiid and Paul George by that point. But for the time being, let's sit back and relax and stay out of the Jonathan Kuminga sweepstakes. Let me know if you guys agree with me or disagree in the comments. Drop your thoughts below and make sure you're smashing that subscribe button if you have not already. Also, drop a like on this video if you have not just yet, and stay tuned for the next video right here on Sixers Digest. I'll be with you guys from start to finish this year, wherever this crazy Sixers world takes us, so I want as many of you as possible along for the ride. So smash that subscribe button, and I will talk with you next time. Peace.